Hang in there, it is! Smylie Kaufman for 61. Wow.
I'm Smylie Kaufman, and this is The Smylie Show.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of The Smylie Show. This is going to be a fantastic interview that we have for you guys today with Kyle Porter, formerly with CBS, now has his own newsletter. You need to go and check it out. Normal Sport is where you can find it. And Charlie, this was a great interview, and Kyle is fantastic at what he does. So we actually got to just ask him all the questions that you and I talk about all the time.
As you mentioned, as we've been prepping for this interview, the two mainstays that have unpaid honorary emeritus research positions on the show are Justin Ray, of course, and Kyle Porter. We read more of their tweets than anybody else. They bring us the best content. So I was looking forward to this one for a while. Also, as you mentioned, if you go to normalsport.com and subscribe to his newsletter, he's had a lot of really cool ones since announcing his departure from CBS. Had a two-parter with Rory McIlroy that made some news. So excited to get into that and maybe some fun stuff at the end as well.
It was really fun at the end for sure. That was something that we should definitely do more of. But, I think it's fun to have somebody that's been covering the game for as long as he has, kind of been through what was just the normal PGA Tour to when it started to getting more fractured when the Saudis came into action. So having a guy that's kind of been through it all from a media standpoint and has, had to form opinions based off of, just craziness that ensued. I thought it was fun to kind of pose those questions on him as well.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle's got a great perspective. He's got a great big picture view on things. He's obviously in the weeds reporting on it, but also can kind of go to the 10,000 foot level. And we'll get into it in the interview, but defining normal sport there's a little bit of tongue in cheek nature there. Golf is anything but a normal sport. And so I love Kyle's sort of comedic approach to like this whole thing we're doing. It is pretty absurd, and it's pretty cool that we get to do this for work. So yeah, as you mentioned, normalsport.com. It's got 3 books out, Normal Sport 1, 2, and 3. Worth checking all that out. And what do you think, Smylie? I think we get right to it. Get going here with Kyle Porter.
Well, as you guys just heard, Kyle Porter is now joining the Smylie Show. Kyle, thank you for joining us. And really, you and Justin Ray probably get the most shout outs of any of the people that we talk about in the show, because y'all always bring the heat when it comes to the stats. I'm like, Charlie, dude, you got to go to Kyle's Twitter, see if there's anything that we can use, because you always are burying up something that is useful and just something to always ponder about.
Yeah, it's thanks for saying that. I'm trying to walk in Jay Ray's footsteps.
He definitely walks so a lot of people can run it, because that guy's like the OG, right?
He's definitely the OG. I'd love to talk stats. We can talk. I was led to believe that we were going to talk second half LSU A&M. If you want to do that,
is that your team,
Kyle?
No.
That's big from a guy who's 0-5 in Big 12 conference play. That's a lot of heat coming.
Oklahoma State is terrible. They're not even going to make a bowl. It's atrocious.
Man,
Cardinals will be lucky to go to the Mayo Bowl. So I mean, I think Smiley's definitely sitting in the pole position of the 3 college football teams on this podcast.
I'm just messing around. The atmosphere did look incredible, though. Like, I've been to Kyle Field, I think once or twice, and it's a little weird at times, that whole place, but like the actual game atmosphere is phenomenal. It's amazing.
You could hear it through the TV, and when that train got rolling the other night, it was a tough scene. It was not going to stop. So from an LSU Tiger fan, it was not fun to watch, but I got to give credit to the Aggies on a well-played game and a good win. But we're here. I guess this is the loser pod now of college football. We got Charlie joining us for the North Carolina, Kyle Porter from Oklahoma State, and the once glorious LSU Smylie Kaufman here. So Kyle, and we do a little intro right here before this, and most of us know you from CBS, where you covered golf for more than 12 years, authored 3 books, Normal Sport 1, 2, and 3. Now you're independent, writing a newsletter for more than 15,000 golf fans at the aptly named normalsport.com. So why don't you just talk about Normal Sport? Because I think it's such a great way to describe where golf is now, which is a once very easy sport to cover. You had Tiger Woods, you had it being a very niche sport, but now it's a popular sport. Now it's a confusing sport at the professional level. And we are lucky in that we're media and we get to talk about it and cover this crazy game.
Yeah, we are. It's, it's funny because it's changed even since I got into it at the end of 2012. That was my first month with CBS was like December 20. I guess my first like real month was the very beginning of 2013. And you're right. It was just a lot more straightforward back then. I think you're like, oh, I think Rory's going to win a bunch and then Jordan's going to win a bunch. And I mean, at that point, I guess it was at some point in 2015, those two guys held all four majors. And then it feels like ever since then, everything just got really strange and fractured and weird. But, the origin of normal sport, people ask me this a lot about like, where did you get, like, it's obviously a tongue in cheek play on like how golf is so weird and bizarre. And you've got, the chain gang bringing out lines to figure out if Bryson's ball is out of bounds in Memphis. And you've got Xander and burrowing animal holes in Phoenix, just really strange stuff that doesn't happen at Raiders Chiefs.
Bryson carrying the the sign at the Masters this year.
Yeah.
That's one that's definitely in the normal sport category.
He looked like he was like bearing his own cross at Amen Corner. No pun intended. But the origin of it, for whatever reason, I don't know. I don't actually know when it was, but I have this picture of Tyrrell Hatton in my head of him like in the fairway, maybe at Bay Hill, maybe at the 2020 US Open. And he's just like gesticulating and in like basically doing a yoga pose to identify his ball because it had mud on it or something like that. And you're like, what am I watching? This is so strange to be watching this on TV. And you get a million of those every week. And yeah, I write a newsletter about it now. So it's been a ton of fun, but it's definitely, there's no shortage of strange events in the world of golf.
So Kyle, I'll let you kind of help me define the parameters of this question. You can workshop this one with me, but all that you just kind of teed up there, defining what the whole normal sport concept or bit is. If you're making a medal podium of like all-time normal sport moments in the game of golf, what's your bronze, silver, and gold entries?
Wow.
And tell me if all time's too much. We can kind of shrink it to a tighter time period, but I'm just curious if you have 3 of those in mind.
That's a great question. The first thing that comes to mind, honestly, is Greller yelling at Spieth at the 17 Open at Carnoustie. I guess it was 13 or 14. Or excuse me, Spieth yelling at Greller, just saying, "Give me a round number," because there was no, he's over by the equipment. First of all, if you're tuning in to NBC, shout out to Smylie. If you're tuning in to NBC and you hadn't watched anything and you just see these 18-wheeler like trucks like off the side of this like basically this forest, or not forest, but like a park. You're like, what am I watching? I thought I was tuning into golf, and you've got Spieth running around over there yelling at Greller to give him a round number because he has no idea what the yardage is. So that's the first one that comes to mind. And I think a lot of them actually, Charlie, they're predicated upon this idea that golf is played not in like every other sport you watch, tennis, basketball, World Series, football. They're all in a set field or stadium, or like there's guidelines around it. And in golf, you've got people walking into the woods, and we see it every single week. And I think that's like, I love that golf is in nature because I think it provides a sort of spirituality there that a lot of sports don't provide, because you can go play with your dad or your brother or whatever, your sister in nature, and you're kind of taking a hike and just like carrying a bunch of metal sticks with you. But it also makes for some really bizarre moments throughout all these events and major championships. The top 3 question is a good one though. I need to actually go back and make that maybe like a top 10, I think would be, and then you could have it like, okay, well, did this surpass like whenever something happens at Riviera next year, does this crack the top 10, like a Hall of Fame normal sport moment?
I was almost thinking of like the Richter scale, like an earthquake. Like it has to have like a normal sport like rating scale of where does this land amongst all time normal sport events. But that's good. That's it.
Bryson is actually the author of a lot of them. I mean, just the fact like he got glossed over. He prints his own golf clubs, and you're like, what?
It's
like roll bulge combo this year. Just
yeah, you're like,
stuff.
Arnold Palmer's, probably, I don't know if he actually did this, but repping or selling Xerox machines, like, printers, and Bryson's printed his own golf clubs. Like that's absurd.
So good.
What's your most normal sport moment from a media perspective? I thought you asked a brilliant question to Rory in the newsletter recently that you just had, and maybe Charlie, you may remember the quote a little bit better as far as like what was asked, but it was something along the lines of asking Rory about media in general and a question that he maybe has not been asked before.
Yeah, I think that poses it well. I mean, I just thought, Kyle, it was interesting to flip it on him in a way where, and even just unpacking his answer. Like, I'm curious what your reaction was to him saying, or maybe just what you took from his answer, and maybe just explain that a little bit. Because for me, it was like, what are you trying to say there? Do you not want us critiquing? He was clear about it's okay to critique bad performances, but negativity about the game overall was kind of what I took away from what he had to say to you.
And Charlie, the question was about media, correct?
Yeah, it was simply just, what is something we do all the question asking? What's something you want to ask the media?
Yeah, and he kind of came at it from a why does everything always have to be negative perspective? And my initial pushback on that was what you just said of like, well, wait a second, like we do have to sort of talk about. You miss a putt to lose I literally said, you miss a putt to lose the US Open. We have to. And he was like, no, I'm not talking about that. He said, I'm talking about just from a broader perspective and the way that people sort of come at their job. And he got rolled up into this thing that I don't know that it's what he meant. It kind of got rolled into this thing of like, Rory doesn't want anybody to talk about, how bad the professional landscape is in golf right now. And maybe that is what he was talking about. I haven't talked to him since then. We haven't discussed it, but I took it more as like he was coming at it from the perspective of we've all met people in media or that are covering the sport that honestly, you're like, do you even like golf? Like, do you even enjoy this? And I think in some cases the answer is no. You're like, well, why are you doing it then? Like, if there's no joy in this, maybe you just view it as like, well, I have to pay the bills or whatever. And I think he and I align, and probably you guys too, of like, this is the coolest job in the world. I mean, Smylie probably had the coolest job in the world of playing professional golf, but like, it's up there, top 5. And I always have, I kind of came into golf from I had a really weird path and not traditional journalism or anything like that. And I'm looking around at these people who are complaining at the US Open or, the media hotel was too full, whatever. And you're like, what are you guys talking? Like, my friends are so jealous of yes, it's a job at times and you got to do the work or whatever. But I think, like, to me in the moment when we were talking, that felt like more of what he was referencing. And I think his worldview and my worldview is very aligned in that, because he's talked a lot about, I'm the luckiest dude in the world to get to do what I do and to have the life that I have. And I feel very much the same about my own life and about my own job. So I don't know. That was sort of how I took it.
Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I guess for me, Kyle, I was trying to I had a similar reaction to that of just thinking about maybe media members and the way that the coverage of the game sort of happens, and trying to leave some kind of grace or room for people who love this game so much and maybe love a version of the professional game they've known for a long period of time so much that the fracturing that's happening, all that sort of stuff, that their critique or negativity is coming from a place of, oh man, I really, really care about this thing. And I don't want to see it, change into something that I don't love as much as maybe I used to. So trying to kind of separate that from your point of like complaints about, shuttle buses or, whatever, media hotels and stuff like that. Just a general, like, if you don't enjoy any of this, you're not obligated to cover it in that way.
Yeah.
And I also think that's, and this is maybe a tangent we'll get into maybe later on in this conversation, but there are different ways to participate in the golf media landscape that don't have to involve covering the professional game of golf if that's something that you can't feel anything but negative towards. So that's where it hit me. I thought it was a fantastic conversation.
Yeah. And I think if he was referencing like the critique of where professional, especially men's professional golf is right now, then yeah, I think that does deserve pushback. But I also feel like if I don't know, in the moment, if I would have thought that's what he was referencing, then I would have pushed back on it. So I don't know. Maybe I should have more in that, like within that, but that's not, it's not totally how I took it in the moment.
Well, the professional game is definitely split with PGA Tour and LIV. We know this. I mean, even media, right? Like you have certain journalists that cover LIV golf, and it's a shouting match a lot of the times with the typical LIV accounts that cover the LIV Tour, and then you have the PGA Tour accounts that cover the PGA Tour, and it. You know, in the professional game, it's just we're in a real weird spot right now. So what I want to ask you, which is probably something you haven't thought a whole lot about, which is, you know, for somebody that's been covering the sport for quite some time, you've probably been aware of a lot of the storylines leading up to before the LIV Golf Tour was started. So if it was you and you were Jay Monahan, or you were somebody that was high up in the PGA Tour, and you could have done one thing differently to change the outcome of professional golf, whatever year it would have been, you know, whether it was, you know, the Premier Golf League idea that was proposed, is there something that you would have done as Commissioner Kyle Porter of the PGA Tour that you would have potentially tried to do, or do you think do you think LIV Golf and the Saudis were always going to happen?
It's a really good question. I have thought about it some, and I think some of it's predicated on how much of Phil's Twitter account you believe, because
that's a good point.
There's a lot there that you're like, I don't know if it went exactly like that. There's in all seriousness, there's a New Yorker article from, I believe it was fall of 2022, so basically 2 years ago right now. And there's a little like nugget in there, and it's kind of a report on, you know, they're looking from a geopolitical global perspective on all this because it's the New Yorker and it's very heady and whatever. But there's a little nugget in there that basically said, I think it was Yasser and I can't remember the other guy's name. The guy that left LIV, he was kind of Yasser's like right-hand man.
Yes.
You know who I'm talking about?
I do, and also forgetting his name. But yeah,
even if I knew
involved,
it,
right?
I would butcher it. But there's a nugget in there about how they kind of came to the PGA Tour and to Jay Monahan and wanted to invest, I think it was $1 billion into the sport over the next however many years. And they were rebuffed. They wouldn't take their call. Sort of like the PGL of like, we're good. Like, I think we're okay. And I think to me, that is sort of the, it's not the obvious turning point because you could point to a million other things, but to me, it's the sort of hidden turning point of like I just feel like there was a lack of foresight, and I'd like to think that I'd have better foresight. I don't know that I would, but there's a lack of foresight of like, okay, we either this is inevitable and these guys, because this is what these guys do, or we're going to see it out till the end. And they just got hung up between release patterns, so to speak, and didn't do either. Right. And I look back on that moment of like, you gotta at least like listen to the vision, listen to the call. And I'd like to think that is the one thing that I would have done differently. Maybe it doesn't turn out the same, maybe it doesn't turn out any differently. But I think to not listen to people that are trying to put $1 billion into your product, into your organization is such a misstep.
Well, it's interesting because I think so much of the early discussions that we had or that we heard in sort of the golf media space were related to very rightful moral concerns, right? And that was like the major headline, and there's no possible way you could get into business with this crew. And then over time, the inevitability of that sum of money just had people, and I think Rory might have been the strongest with comments along the lines of, hey, like if they're going to bring you this level of investment, you find a way to work it in your ecosystem in a way that suits you and the things you're trying to achieve with the game, rather than letting them come and disrupt and do what they want to do with it, which maybe doesn't suit our means, the way we'd like to see the game grow or be kind of built up at the professional level or grassroots levels. So, I mean, I wonder if there's part of it, where looking back on it now, it's just, I guess it's hard. I wonder how you parse through the moral concerns relative to the inevitability of that sum of money. And if you feel any differently now than you did when this all kind of came on the scene originally.
I think I feel differently about criticizing guys in specific ways for going. I do think there's still some unseriousness to it that you're like, I don't know, man, like, I don't know how serious you are about golf anymore. One of the things that changed it for me was Charles Howe going. He's a buddy, not a buddy, but like we're professionally close and he's a serious person. And so you're like, that's different than some of these other guys going. Like, I view that differently than some of the other people that took the money. I think the moral stance is difficult. And I think that's where I have some regret of like, I was pretty critical from a moral perspective. Some of it's fair probably, but some of it I think started to go too far from myself even. And the hard part about if you're coming at it from a moral perspective is if you're not hard line with everybody in your organization or everybody that's like sort of on the other side, then you're gonna be made to look foolish, right? Because that's what happened to Rory essentially was and it wasn't totally moral for him. There was some other stuff I think involved probably, but there was a morality to it. And then not everybody was on the same page, clearly. And then all of a sudden you look like a fool whenever something transpires. So I think that's the part that's really interesting to look back on is everybody took this moral stance, or we thought everybody did. And clearly not everybody did. And then all of a sudden the whole thing looks silly whenever the deal gets done.
And there's no reason for us to talk about why John Rahm went or why other guys are considering going. But in where we are in LIV Golf, let's just break down the product in LIV Golf, because for many times on this podcast, we constantly are talking about the PGA Tour and how they should continue to evolve their product to make it more engaging for the fan and make it more watchable and make it make sense. But for LIV Golf, it's nice to have somebody else on here to give us a little bit more insight or about maybe what they like about LIV Golf. Is there anything that you like about LIV Golf? Or do you think the whole product, like many people think, is something that's unsustainable and hard to watch?
Yeah, I don't know if it's sustainable from a business perspective, but I do think that the team aspect of LIV Golf is very intriguing to me. And I'll give you a story. The reason why I think that is because I remember watching one of the first tournaments. I think it was maybe Portland or one of the early ones. And I was watching with my sons who were 8 and 6 at the time. And my 8-year-old was like, Dad, I think it's cool that they have teams. I'd love to see JT and Rory and Spieth on the same team. And you're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I don't know that I would have articulated it that simply, but for him, it was like, I'm used to watching baseball or football or basketball and rooting for the Dodgers or the Rangers or the Mavericks or whoever. And so it does make sense from his perspective about having teams. I've actually always liked the team aspect of LIV. I don't know that they adjudicate it in a way that the end of season deal, I still am kind of confused on.
Are you still concerned about the Taylor Gooch, Matthew Wolff trade? Is that what you're trying to get down to?
For sure. I have a lot of questions. The salary cap was really bent to make that happen. But I do think the team aspect, and this is where you go back to PGL of like, oh, this from a business standpoint, I think had legs of like, oh, so Callaway, instead of spending money on commercials, can have a team that wins a league that gives them X number more marketing dollars than, or TaylorMade or whoever. Sorry, Titleist. I guess I should have said. And I think that's where, from a business perspective, you're like, oh, that actually makes sense. And you get a younger audience. Like, I think there's something there. I don't know how to figure that out in a league where you still want to play TPC Sawgrass and Riv and Muirfield Village and all these places. But I do think there's something there that LIV got right. I think a lot of the rest of it they got wrong, but that would be the thing that I would point to that I've enjoyed.
Another piece of it that Smylie and I have talked about on the show extensively is just the willingness. And obviously, I think they had really no other choice to kind of zag when the PGA Tour is playing a domestic schedule, but to really lean into the global aspect of that tour, even if it means, and I think, and partially maybe the other part of it is they're freed up by not having a major American television contract where if they're not delivering ratings in, primetime slots, they're going to get, they're not going to fulfill the nature of that deal. But I thought it was interesting this last week, just hearing JT and Xander talk about how much they enjoyed playing in front of the Japanese crowds for the Zozo and how they'd like to do more of that, against comments from Cam Smith talking about, going to LIV, still the best decision he's ever made in his life because he's able to spend more time in Australia, and just thinking about catering to some of the international players that we love seeing on the PGA Tour, but who definitely would love to play a more international schedule. And maybe this is kind of getting a little bit off the LIV topic here, but Smylie and I discuss at length, like, how nice would it be if the fall swing for the elite players became a trip over to play some of these DP World Tour events that are national opens set in beautiful scenic backdrops. I wonder what your thoughts are there in terms of, how do we make the game more global so we're not losing those guys to a tour like LIV?
Yeah, I think LIV Australia is like the archetype for that, right? Like, it's been, I think it would be hard to say it hasn't been successful. It's been, I mean, at least from afar, it's been very cool. I think what's hard, Charlie, is the thing you mentioned about the television contract with, US companies. And it's like, okay, if you start to, I'm very pro global tour, and I know a lot of players are not, some players are, whatever. I think it's really hard to start to replace those massive US centric television contracts if you start to unbundle that PGA Tour being mostly in the US. And I think it would be amazing if you started like in the Far East and just went west the whole year and ended in Scotland, Ireland, Spain, in some parts of Europe. But from a business standpoint, does that make any sense? I don't know. Maybe I don't know what let's take F1. I don't know what their contracts are globally with different TV partners in Japan or Italy or some of these places that they go. Maybe you could kind of cobble together whatever the total amount of your US contracts are globally, but I think it'd be hard because I think those US contracts are so solidified, they're so natural, they're so easy, or not easy, but they've come together over time, and I think it'd be difficult to kind of put something together that makes sense from a business standpoint outside of that.
Well, I'll go the opposite now, since we just talked about LIV. So PGA Tour, and for instance, just the playoffs, a very, hot topic when it comes to trying to figure out exactly how to fix it, because I don't think they have an answer yet, because they know they have to get finished before football. And Charlie just noted that the DP World Tour, if you go play these national opens, and if you've noted or noticed, these are finishing before football, before noon. So there is a way in which you can go play over these national opens, but PGA Tour, I mean, if there's a couple line items that come to your head of, yes, like this needs to change, and like this is the most no-brainer thing to do, is it about playoffs, or is there anything else that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, so two things. One, I've written about this a little bit. I'd like to write about it more at some point. I think that I'll give you two different scenarios, and they're going to be different, but I think you could end the season at the Open and maybe move it back like 2 or 3 weeks into August, and just end the season there. It's a very natural, climax for the whole year. I mean, we're on
the same page there, isn't it the only issue is that the Open is not owned by the PGA Tour? Like that totally. To me is like the big problem in that. But you're right that it is the perfect crescendo.
It is. And you're right about the PGA. All of this is people don't like common fans like my dad. My dad's a pretty like big golf fan. He didn't realize until a few years ago that the PGA Championship wasn't run by the PGA Tour. That's a very like normal common thing. And that used to be like, oh, kind of a funny talking point. And now it's like, no, you kind of have to understand how all these organizations work together to figure out like some of the solutions to this stuff. So I think that's one thing. And then the other scenario, and maybe you can fit these together somehow. The best thing the PGA Tour has, or the best property it has, it's not even close to me, is the Players Championship. Players Championship is extraordinary. It's amazing. I think it's like, in terms of my interest and intrigue, it's right up there with a major. You can call it whatever you want, but I'm locked in like I am during US Open week. And so is there a way that you can lean into that as your end of PGA Tour year? Now, that's weird because it's in March, so it's just a weird time. Do you move it again? I don't know what the answer is to that, but
that'd be hot in August, wouldn't it?
It would not be good. Yeah, it would be very bad in August. But when you have something that is that good, if you're any business, the best thing is to double down on it, right? And so I don't, from a scheduling perspective, again, you're battling. I mean, that's an uphill battle against 4 or 5 other organizations that you're trying to work with.
I wonder how much of this larger discussion, because we had this discussion on the pod last night where we're talking about Camilo Villegas, the letter he sent after the PAC meeting at the Shriners, where they're proposing going from 125 cards to 100. They're proposing cutting 10 Korn Ferry Tour cards, and we're talking about the fall schedule, and it's like, hey, this should make the fall more compelling for sure. But our choice one is we go over and we play in Europe and we play these cool places, the DP World Tour. But what we're talking about right now is a set of solutions to a PGA Tour problem. So you have to kind of put it in that box. And I think that's where, and you already kind of talked about it here, but just how much of this is when you're talking about this to friends or family, or where you're talking about this in a newsletter to a larger audience, where it's like, hey, this is the best case scenario, but here are the 10 reasons why this can't happen that involve sponsors or even like resorts. Like, why do you think the Pebble Beach Resort Company wants people to go there into January, February? That's because they're selling the course. They have it booked out during the good months. That's why they're having the tournament in that period of time instead of in August, when it would make perfect sense as a Tour Championship climax, but everyone's trying to go play there and pay hundreds of dollars to play it. So is that a frustrating part of what you're trying to do as a writer in golf media? Of like, I'd love for it to be this way, and I'd keep suggesting this, but there are just too many realities that prevent it from being that way.
Yeah, I think you have to kind of bucket those into 2 things, which is the fan perspective and then the non-fan perspective. And most of the news or information that you get is from the non-fan perspective, because the PGA Tour is player run and there's executives with it. I mean, this is all about, like, what you're describing is all about incentives, right? Where the players that get to vote on a lot of these things on the PGA Tour, of course, like, they're incentivized toward wanting more spots and wanting more tournaments. And like, that makes total sense. Like, I don't begrudge anybody for that, because if I was in that position, guess what? I'd be doing the exact same thing. Right. And so I think the problem has become, and this is sort of how I describe it, is like, what's best for player or executive or event sponsor or organizer is not always what's best for fan. And I think those things that's true in any sport. I think, but I think it's especially notable in golf because you have so many different organizations, because you have the logistics of the PGA Tour, just the PGA Tour you couldn't pay, like, if somebody offered me $5 million a year to run the logistics of the PGA Tour, I would not do it. It seems insane. And now you exponentially increase that with other tours and other leagues and Korn Ferry and all this different stuff. And it's incredibly difficult. And so I think that's what I'd kind of turn to, of like, well, why am I not getting what I want as a fan? Well, some of these logistics are, do I wish that you could just blow it up and start over and start fresh? Absolutely. But I don't know that that's a reality over the next 5 or 10 years.
Well, Kyle, I mean, I've already asked you, what would you go back and change? So now I'm going to allow you to hold the crystal ball here. So I'm not having you tell us exactly what's going to happen, but if there's something that you feel like that you can predict as we go ahead in the next 5 to 10 years, whether it's how all these players are going to fit together, or maybe if it's the PGA Tour and the Saudis and the PIF on how they're going to continue to leverage against each other as they try to find common ground.
Ooh, that's a tough one. It's a lot more fun to think backwards rather than try to predict forwards. So one prediction that I have, and this is not, I guess it's like sort of tangential to the PIF and the PGA Tour, but I think the European Tour will go away over the next 5 or 10 years. And by go away, I mean be absorbed into some bigger entity, whether that's the PGA Tour or if it gets I don't know. I don't know like what's going to happen with that, but it like the clear trajectory of the what used to be the European Tour is now the DP World Tour is that it will just kind of, I mean, it's already essentially become like a one spot below the top of the pyramid if you're trying to get to the top. And I think that trajectory will continue. One interesting part of that is going to be the Ryder Cup, that they obviously own the European portion or that property, the European side of the Ryder Cup. So that'll be fascinating, but I just, and maybe that won't happen. Who knows? But to me, that trajectory seems like a pretty, I don't know about obvious, but it seems like a pretty reasonable one to kind of presume over the next 5 or 10 years.
Do you expect the Saudis to continue try to play the leverage game, whether with its players or properties that they could go purchase or organizations? Do you foresee that being their next steps if they can't, find common ground with the PGA Tour?
Gosh, I hope not. It's been miserable. It's been interesting, right? We have things that we can talk about in October. But I do wonder, like, this was something I was thinking about the other day. Is the PGA Tour just like trying to wait them out right now? Are they trying to say like, we bet you won't give Phil another $200 million? Or I don't know. Like, I don't know if that's a game you want to play for the PGA Tour, but it does kind of feel like, guys, I know this is complicated. I know there's like lawyers involved, but we're not signing the Treaty of Versailles here. Like it shouldn't like necessarily take as long as it's taken. So I am curious if from the PGA Tour side, if they're trying to kind of wait out some of these contracts and some of this trajectory, and then eventually it just sort of like fades away. There's no business reason to continue with LIV, right? There's no indication. There's no signal that it's like, this is a good idea. And I just don't know what the Yasser and the people at the PIF, I don't know what their directives are. I don't know what their goals are. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Especially as nothing is happening over a longer period of time. And the more you read, the more you're like, it does seem like the Saudis are kind of pulling back some of their investments globally, not just in sports. So I don't know. I think I would say that I don't think they're going to make more investment into golf. I think they're just going to try to get this tour deal done and see where they go from there.
So flip side of that, if we're talking about guys who are coming into their contracts, we're not sure whether or not the PIF, the Saudis want to extend those contracts for hundreds of millions of dollars. Brooks Koepka, Cam Smith, someone in that lane. That player's contract once, and he indicates that he wants to come back to the PGA Tour. How do you think that is ultimately going to get handled? Because that's been a topic of much discussion or debate, and maybe I guess my personal opinion, when it was happening earlier on, it would make sense to maybe lessen the penalties so you could hurt LIV by letting a guy come back and taking a prime player for them. Do you think that changes at all if it's just a contract running and they're not re-signing with LIV? I'm just curious how you think the tour is going to use that as a leverage piece if it means they can pull an asset from LIV back to the tour while there's a whole group of guys that want him penalized or forfeiting money or something of that nature.
Yeah, I don't know, because I think the weird question there is how many guys even want to, right? Like Brooks probably does, but does Like, does Paul Casey want to play like Colonial?
I think the answer is pretty obvious. I think plenty of those guys left for the reasons, that they're just getting older. They don't want to play a full schedule, and it's hard to compete. And especially because it's going to be hard for these PGA Tour guys that have an off year. Let's say a guy like Ricky, for example, who's in all the signature events, has a bad year, goes from, into a great spot to potentially off the tour. So they're making it more competitive on the tour, but I don't think many of the guys that have gone to LIV, maybe a couple of them can really, want to have the juice to still go compete, right?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that I remember Dan Rappaport wrote about this before Brookline, I guess it was 2 years ago, about like, hey, what is LIV going to do to the competitiveness of guys that have gone when they play at the Masters and the majors and stuff? And this year was not pretty in terms of the majors, other than Bryson. Bryson was very good, obviously. One of the great major seasons ever. And Rahm played very well at the Open, but other than that, there was just nothing, and so I don't know. Guys rejoining it would be hilarious to see, like, Phil at like PGA Tour Latino America or just something insane. Like that would be incredible. Obviously it won't happen, but I don't know. I don't know how much leverage there is to be had there, because I don't know how much tension there is there between most of those guys and wanting to come back.
All right, last piece of prognostication. I don't know if this is more optimistic or more dystopian, but I really enjoyed the exchange you had with Sean Zach in your newsletter, and you referenced the piece he wrote, where just talking about looking at the PGA Tour TV product and looking at the growing YouTube golf space and how the tour should borrow from that, even to kind of merge their content ideas with that. And I wonder, this is really going far out, and maybe it's tough to say right now, but as that space continues to grow, as there are more and more eyeballs there, as there's more money being spent on that YouTube golf space, where do you think we're going to be in like 5 or 10 years? Like, do you see there ever being a tipping point where it actually makes more sense as an advertiser to spend there instead of on a traditional, linear television broadcast, whatever that looks like, whatever platform that's on, for a professional golf tournament?
I think we're already there. I mean, I don't know. So it's been interesting. I've been out drumming up sponsorships for my own newsletter. And I think that a lot of the play for these companies is brand association. So it's not necessarily conversion or whatever. Like Callaway wants to be associated with Good, right? For example. And yeah, they may or may not sell a ton of golf balls or hats or whatever they're collaborating on making together, but it's a long-term play of taking your legacy brand and associating it with a cool younger brand. Titleist is doing this with No Lane Up, right? And I think that what you get in that for the length of the contract, or if you decide to purchase, if you decide to try to buy one of those businesses, if you're a legacy company buying a smaller business like that, is you get distribution to 1 million, 5 million, whatever, pretty rabid 27-year-old to 20 or 38-year-old golf fans that have a pretty high disposable income. That sounds like a pretty great deal, right? And I think that I think that is going to be, I think it's very smart for legacy media company or legacy companies in general to do that, to partner with companies like that, even to buy them out. I don't know that everybody has recognized that yet. I think it's obvious. And I think clearly some companies do as well, but I don't know that everybody has. I think companies in general, when they spend their ad money, are slow. Companies are just slow, right? They're big, like these Titanic like businesses, and it's hard to turn that. It's hard to turn, And so I think companies that have done it are to be commended. And I'm probably incentivized to say that as a small company that is looking for advertising dollars. But I do think it's wise for companies to, like legacy businesses, to partner with those smaller companies.
Oh, you came to the right place as far as the small shops trying to get some business dollars coming in.
A couple small businesses.
Yeah. Well, there is a trickle down effect to this too, Kyle, right? When we're talking about the PGA Tour and the players, for instance, when I was on tour, even well before me, players, didn't matter who you were. You come up from the Korn Ferry Tour, the Web.com, or the Hogan Tour, you got a PGA Tour contract from these legacy companies like you're talking about, the club manufacturers. It was always a big deal. Now, what you're starting to see is the investment, like you said, into more YouTube type of properties that have the big audiences, and then much more of an emphasis on paying their top guys. And then as it trickles down to the rest of the guys on tour, it's not quite as easy to get, the re-ups, the extensions of making a lot more money. So you're seeing it kind of trickle down to the PGA Tour players as well.
Totally. And I think what's interesting about that is, we kind of joke about who's more recognizable in the golf world, Riggs or JT Poston? It's not even close, right? JT Poston's on national television every once in a while. Riggs has Barstool has the foreplay, he's on YouTube all day, every day. And I think what you're saying is right, Smylie. You're still going to get the Rory, Spieth, Scotty, whoever the top 10 guys are, top 5 guys, because they're on TV all the time, whether they're playing well or not. But for the numbers 11 through whatever, it can make more sense to go and sponsor Grant Horvat or whoever, who people are, you're betting on whether this guy gets into contention, or you're just betting on whether people are just going to tune in to watch Grant Horvat. It seems like a much less risky bet to kind of go in that direction, which is fascinating. Who could have even envisioned that 20 years ago? That would have sounded insane to people. And now it's just a very normal reality.
Well, it's the fact that, now when you look at the PGA Tour socials, if Wesley Bryan is playing in an event, it's Tiger Woods like coverage of Wesley and George playing. And who would have ever seen that Wesley would have ever gotten? And I like Wesley. I'm friends with Wesley, but it's a conversation worth having, right? That he is made himself marketable. The PGA Tour realizes they need to keep trying to grab this audience to watch their stuff, like you saw at the Creator Classic at Eastlake, which I think was I think Charlie definitely saw it as a success. I definitely did. From you got fans excited about seeing how these guys they watch on TV on YouTube to see how they're going to play on a golf course that will ultimately determine who wins the PGA Tour season-long race.
Yeah, and I think YouTube is so interesting because my kids who are 11, 10, 7, they don't even know the difference between YouTube and traditional television, right? And YouTube's the one place where you're like if you look at Twitter, you can still see an obvious difference between Twitter and a newspaper. There's a differentiation there. And with YouTube, that wall is completely down. And so that's the one platform that I think has completely erased the past. I mean, it just is there's no barrier, there's no nothing there. And I think you're going to continue to see that to happen specifically with YouTube. I think that's the place where most of that is going to keep taking place.
Well, Kyle, let's finish this conversation with the snake draft because because if there's anything about guys, it's doing a draft. Guys love a draft. So I was thinking about, Kyle's a historian. He's our Twitter guy. He's got all the fun stats. So let's do this. Let's go back over the last decade of major championships. And I want each of us in a draft order. You're going to be the number 1 pick, and we're going to draft 2 each. So you're going to get the first pick, and you're going to get the last pick of what you think was the best major championship over the last decade. So there's going to be some obvious answers in there at number 1 pick. You have a lot of pressure here because I think there's some pretty obvious answers here at the top of the board.
Yeah, I'm probably going to whiff on all of them. Are you saying I have the number one pick?
You're going to start because you are a guest.
Okay.
Charlie then will go second. I'll take the third and fourth.
Okay.
Charlie will get the fifth pick, and then you round us out at 6. So
Okay, so we're going back to what,
15.
2014.
is our cutoff. Are we including
Well, it's
14?
2014. Yeah.
That's 11 years of majors.
Technically,
though.
that's 11.
I hate to be the stickler here.
Okay,
I know
so
we're not a chronological podcast.
So 15 to 24, which was
Okay,
the
so
Jordan Spieth, Jason Day, Jordan Spieth, Zach Johnson year.
Yeah. Okay. So 15 Masters, and we're drafting based on like just best tournament.
It's every category that you can think of. The who won, how they won, just your overall memory of that moment. All of those things you can take in, weather, whatever it is, and you can come up with your own sort of criteria.
Gosh, I'm gonna get. God, this is hard because I mean, I think the obvious one is the 2019 Masters, right? Tiger wins. I was there. It was cool. It was weird because it was in the early Sunday morning. It started at
Right.
He teed off at whatever.
It finished in 1 or 2. Yeah.
Yeah. It was that was odd. The ending was incredible. I don't know if that was a great full like 4-round event though. I'm gonna bypass that one.
Wow.
I'm gonna say the I actually wasn't at this event because we weren't traveling for COVID still, but I'm going to say the 2021 PGA Championship at Kiowa.
Oh, that's a great one.
It was, and it's a little bit selfish because I think it's very easy to write. I wrote some good stuff on Phil that week, and I think it's so much. I mean, just the 51-year-old like pitted against this, Brooks as a legend. Like it just was a very easy thing to kind of write toward, and I was locked in. I mean, the whole weekend was unbelievable that Phil was doing that he was doing it against Brooks, that he was hitting the shots that he hit. He hit that Pels 8 into the water on
Pels
like
8.
13 or whatever.
Pels 8.
Like there was just so much, the drone, he's yelling at Dottie Pepper. Like the whole thing was nuts. Like it was so crazy. That's the week that Jordan had the X on his back, the Under Armour. It looked like an X. It was the UA.
God.
It looked like he had a
That
target
was a tough
on his back.
scene, man. That was a tough scene. We actually sent that picture of the back of his shirt into our group text the other day. Just had to have another good laugh about that.
Yeah, I'll say 2021 PGA.
Wow. Okay, so Kyle's just passed on the obvious number 1 overall pick. All right, I'm on the clock. Everyone thinks I'm going to do the thing. I'm going to take the can't miss prospect.
You're going to take Reggie Bush.
But I'm looking out there at Music City Hall, and I see my fans back there, the hometown fans from North Carolina. And I've been in the war room with Smylie, banging the drum for YouTube, the rise of YouTube golf.
This feels like recency bias, Charlie.
It is big time recency bias, but I got to do it for the hometown North Carolina fans. I'm going to go 2024 Bryson over Rory and it is definitely recency bias, but I think it's a couple things. It's definitely a homer pick. I live an hour from Pinehurst. I love going there. Love everything about it. Love taking the family there. Thought they did such a fantastic job setting up that course in a way that was a very fair major championship test, but not ridiculous over the edge. And just even the conversations we had that week, Smylie, about just the theater of that final round of Rory and Bryson, looking back at each other and trying to see what the other had done and what chess piece had moved on the board, scoreboard watching, the drama of Rory's missed putts coming down the stretch, and then Bryson's insane bunker shot. I was completely riveted by this. I know it's recency bias, but I'm doing the homer pick. I'm taking 2024 Pinehurst number 2, Bryson.
I mean, this is great, guys. I mean, y'all are making it easy on me.
Yeah, I know.
It seems kind of obvious to me that I thought Tiger Woods 2019 Masters was going to be the number 1 pick. It should have been taken number 1. I understand the reasoning of weather, how that impacted just a perfect Sunday down the stretch and maybe 4 rounds. But I felt like the drama on that Sunday of Tiger being able to pull off the shots and everybody else not, I think just made that win just feel so much bigger, because Tiger has always been able to hit the shots under pressure, and all of these guys like Brooks Koepka, who had been just on a roll, man. Like, this guy is crushing it in the major. He's the next big thing. Just can't hit the shot on 12. Molinari, like, on a roll, can't hit the shot on 12, and then can't hit the shot on 15. So give me Tiger number one. It seems pretty obvious. And in the snake draft, as it comes back to me, I have a couple different ways I've been like looking at this, and I want to go to a place in 2019 again. And I think I'm probably going to land on this, although I'm going back and forth between 2015 Jordan Spieth at the Masters, but I don't want to go two at the same venue. So I'll leave that potentially for somebody else, because that, outside of the Tiger Woods Masters, that Jordan Spieth 2015, for whatever reason, just a new American star on the scene. I thought it was one of my favorite Masters ever to watch, but I'm going to go 2019 Shane Lowry. I think with just him being from Ireland, I think the storylines there, I think it's so difficult as a professional to play with every bit of ounce of expectations from a nation that hasn't had the Open Championship in like 68 years, and all the pressures on Rory McIlroy, and then here's Shane Lowry, and just goes out. And maybe not the most exciting Open Championship or major championship over the last decade, but as far as storylines go, I think outside of the Tiger one, like, to me, Shane Lowry winning at Royal Portrush is for me, the number two.
I had Lowry Portrush on the big board. Had to cross that one off now. I had 15 Spieth at the Masters on the big board as well. Who's still up there? I think, and listen, Rory McIlroy, if you're listening or watching to this, I promise I have no vendetta against you. These are the majors that resonated with me personally. 150th Open Championship in 22. Cam Smith just going sicko mode with the putter on Sunday. Obviously, again, a tough finish for Rory, and one that it would have been maybe even higher on the list of majors that were meaningful if Rory had actually pulled through and won the thing. But I still love Cam Smith. I was a big pre-live Cam Smith guy, and watching him get it done in that fashion at the Old Course was just pure electricity in my mind. So that's where I'm going with my pick.
It's a good one. How big is your board, by the way? You mentioned like
it's
five of them.
It's a huge big board. Yeah, it's back in my war room. A lot of consultants. We got a lot of people on payroll here
for the 2-round draft. That's great.
You got to prepare, Kyle.
Just wait. We have another draft right after this. And it's a one answer one. So it's a totally different board.
There's. I'm staring at him right now. I thought Fitzpatrick at Brookline was amazing. Gosh, I don't. The 2016 Open at Troon. I mean, that was
one of the best battles, right?
Yeah, I think I'm between that one and the 2017 Open that Spieth won.
That was pretty dang good too, for different reasons. That's normal sport. A normal sport guy would take the 2017.
Yeah, I think I have to take that one just because of everything that happened. I mean, I think Kuchar played the last 6 and like 1 under and just got his face smashed by just got his soul taken by Spieth. I got to go with that one. You had Go Get That. You had, Spieth. I think he was the hole after the crazy, surrender Cobra thing, that he almost made a 1. He almost hit the pin on, I think it was 14 or 15, which he also almost did in 2016 on 16 on Sunday at Augusta. After obviously that gaff, the approach shot he hit on 16 was like right at the pin. I think it went right over it. So he has a penchant for doing that. But yeah, I'll go 2017 Open. I think that was my favorite golf Twitter 3 hours of all time. I mean, it was like, I just remember, I think it was Kevin Van Valkenburg said, God Save the Queen at one point, just total chaos. And it's like, God Save the Queen. It was insane. It was the best.
Well, make sure that for all of you that are watching and listening, comment what's your favorite ones. Where did we miss out? How did we do? So that was a fun exercise. And we're going to close this exercise with a similar exercise, which is, what was the worst major in the last 10 years? And this will just be a one pick here. This isn't going to be a 2-timer, because we could probably do that for it seems like it just makes sense to do one. So Kyle, again, you are a guest, so why don't you we're going to lead off with you here again.
Can I interject here, because I feel like Smylie should lead off. I feel like we should flip this. Smylie, I feel like there's only one way you can go on this, right? I mean, should you just go ahead and take your pick off the board?
I won't take it.
It's pretty obvious I'm going to take the 2016 Masters for obvious reasons. I don't think my day was wasn't great. I would say that an 81 wasn't what I was looking for on Sunday, but also Jordan not winning after potentially going back to back and just completely annihilating that property and being the Augusta whisperer and then have it all fall apart. And then having Danny Willett win, it was like, what just happened? So I think I speak for a lot of golf fans, and I speak for myself, that I would probably pick that at number one. The other honorable mention is the 2020 Open Championship.
Yeah. Yes, non-existent one.
Electric bounce back vacation, though, Smylie. Many people, they don't forget, they remember. So at least you have that.
So Kyle, you go up next.
Two things on 2016 real quick. One of the great what ifs in golf history is Danny Willett's baby was born early, which allowed him to play in the Masters that year.
Wow.
Yeah.
People forget he was Scotty Scheffler before Scotty Scheffler.
People do. Yeah. He got slightly fewer questions about it than Scotty did. And then two, I think it was Justin Ray that had this stat. Speaking of Justin Ray, our boy, was that the only Masters you played in, Smylie?
Yes. Yeah.
Are you the only person to ever only play in one Masters, but also play in the final group?
I think so. It's if you're going to do the Masters, you might as well just kind of check all of the things off the list. Hole in one, final group. So
there was a stat this year with Ludwig where like the lowest, like the sub 70 round for first time Masters player as well. I forget the exact stat.
Yeah, I shot 69. So I got on Saturday, and that was the lowest score of the day. So I think Ludwig and he's finally joining himself in some elite company. So it's good to see Oberg find himself in some golf history.
Nobody's ever teed off after Smylie on Sunday at the Masters.
Yeah, there you have it.
That's a great one. Put it on the LinkedIn profile. I'm going to go with the 2016.
Wait, that's a great bio. I need to change my Twitter bio. That's a fantastic idea.
There you go.
Sorry. We're going to put that on a t-shirt. Thank you.
I would wear. I'm going to go 2016 PGA Championship. Not sure. You need to pick a 2016 also, Charlie, because we're just going across the board here. But
okay, let me see.
I'm not sure it even happened. Jimmy Walker allegedly beat Jason Day. I remember almost nothing. I think they played 36 on Sunday. It was a weird weather one. It was just not the greatest major championship that's ever been played.
2016 majors. Just we're taking these off the board right now.
Well, we considered 2016 at Troon for Stinson. We agreed that was a good one, and so that really only leaves Dustin Johnson at Oakmont, which
that was good too.
That was good too. So I think I'm gonna skip on those two. I'm gonna end up going. It's a little unfair because honestly, like my remembrance of the 2020 Fall Masters was, I'm so glad that we have something to watch again that feels high leverage, and it was a different experience seeing Augusta in a different sort of shape. But to see a Masters won at 20 under, you get to the end of the tournament, and you're like, oh no, wait, I don't think I wanted it to happen like that. And so I think for me that was. I still weird mixed feelings about it, but I'd probably say that one for me is the one that is.
That's a good call.
Feels weird.
Can we all agree that potentially if it weren't for the drama being Xander, Bryson, and Victor at the PGA Championship this year, that there was all the other stinker categories were like checked off, but you had a very exciting finish. Is that do we feel like that's why that maybe wasn't included on the list?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think PGAs are hard because I think one thing I haven't liked about some of the PGAs is it's hard to make double and triple, right? And when that's the case, it's even hard to make bogeys sometimes. I mean, I remember, was it Xander on like 4 this year when he pulled it way left?
Yeah.
Down in that. And you're like, I think he still made par, or maybe he made 5 or something. I think that can be frustrating for sure.
Well, this was fun, Kyle. And we definitely would like to have you on again because this was, we covered so many great topical items that Charlie and I discuss every single day ad nauseum. So it's nice to have another voice in here, a voice of reason, if you will, when it comes to some of these line items that we discuss. And for those of you that are just now discovering Kyle Porter and you like what you hear and like what you see, make sure you go subscribe and you go sign up for his newsletter that he just started, normalsport.com. Kyle does a tremendous job at what he does. He's easily one of my favorite follows on Twitter and has just got this newsletter going. So y'all make sure you go check it out. And Kyle, we appreciate your time. This was a lot of fun, and hopefully we'll have a fun workshop for you the next time you come on.
Bring a big board next time.
I've given Smylie a new Twitter profile. I mean, it's been a successful day. We can hang him up today. We're good to go.
Nobody has teed off after me at the Masters, and I think that's the best way to close this thing out. Thank you, Kyle.
Thanks, guys.
I listen to this podcast. It's really cool, and
all of our lovely fans and subscribers. But make sure you like and subscribe.
It's cool to see what you guys are doing. I know golf fans appreciate it, but we do too. So please keep it up.
For all the good people at YouTube, like and subscribe.
You guys have some good takes, so I'm happy to come on and shoot the